Well, hey, welcome back to Oval Window Racing. Yeah, today, what went wrong with Six Summer? What went wrong? Several things. One of the things, and surprisingly, caught me off guard. You know, I've been running the Mega Squirt for, wow, a long time. You know, I'm no expert, and I'm still learning, even though it's kind of becoming an outdated system, or at least, you know, my version is. But what I like about it is it's so expandable and so buildable, and that's kind of where I went wrong. There's several different ways to wire the crank sensor, and there's several different types of crank sensors to run. Yeah, there's several different ways to build these Mega Squirts. It all depends on how you're going to trigger the ignition, and of course, and how you're going to fire the ignition. And several years back, I decided to go distributorless. And in doing that, you have a couple different ways to trigger the ignition. Two of the most popular ways is either with a Hall effect sensor or a VR sensor, which is, I think it's variable reluctor sensor. And when you're putting your MS2 or MS3 together, maybe, I don't know what an MS1, I've never seen the inside of one of those, but when you're putting those together, you have the option of telling it in the assembly manual. The assembly manual tells you to build it a certain way, running jump wires for the VR or for the Hall effect sensor. And that's how I built it. I built it on the assembly manual. And I had an issue right at first because I was trying to run a Dodge Hall effect sensor. And I kind of like doing that. You know, that's what's nice about these Mega Squirts is you can use a lot of stuff from junkyards, which means you can get a lot of stuff from you know, auto parts stores if you know what you pulled off the car. And I like that option, you know, because you can go down to your local store and buy a sensor. But I was not able to get that Hall effect sensor to work, and in the process of doing it, they had me put a pull-up in it. And I'm going to show you what that kind of looks like right now. All right, this is what I pulled out of my ECU. Get a good look at it here, see if it'll focus. This is basically a jump wire that ran across the ECU from, I can't even really tell you now, but it had something to do with the ignition. When you run these jump wires when needed, and with that particular Hall sensor, we figured it was needed. And it did actually get the engine to run. It would read a crank's a signal. But with that particular Hall sensor that came off like a Dodge Durango, it never ran well. I kept having sync loss. Basically, the ECU would lose contact with the Hall sensor, and it shuts down and then starts back up when it gets a signal again. So I ditched the Dodge crank sensor and basically just went and bought the one that DIY offered, and they offer two. They offer a Honeywell, and then this what they call a tabbed sensor, Hall effect sensor. And I'm going to show it to you. This here's the Hall effect sensor, and basically it reads this tooth gear here. This is a 36 missing one tooth gear, and that's off Mustang, or they put them on, I think that one was advertised off the Ford F-150, and that's which basically controls all the timing and allows you to run no distributor. But yeah, it was something I did, I'm gonna guess 14 years ago, and the car never really had an issue. You know, I did have some sync loss, but more injectors. I tried to run some weird injectors, and the car didn't like it, and I guess that was basically another noise issue. I mean, I think there was a few times I did have like misses every now and then, and I kind of contributed that to maybe like fuel pressure, because at one time I did find that my wire on my fuel pump was loose on the relay board. After I tightened that, the car ran again. But in the process of trying to find out, one of the issues I was having after the one burnout was the car kept, I guess, missing. I called it a hiccup. You know, you try to take off and it would just struggle, but then it would go. And then get out on a highway, I didn't seem to have a problem. But then, you know, they're at Tri-State, you know, the car did shut off, and it wound up being I figure it was a crank sensor, because I wound up changing the crank sensor and hooked the car up to the laptop, and it fired again. You know, in the process of trying to figure all this stuff out, you know, I have been in contact with DIY, and they've been really good and been very helpful. And I did send that crank trigger back to them so they can kind of examine it. And he said that he could get a signal out of it, but it was funny. So he did figure it was damaged and somehow. But then that's when he asked if I ran a pull-up. You know, because I kind of gave him the history, and I told him I did try to run a Dodge Hall effect sensor, and we had to put a pull-up in the system. And I don't know if I explained, it's a resistor. It has something to do with, I think, power increase. I'm not an electrician, but from what I'm understanding, I kind of think that's what's going on. And that's when he informed me that this particular Hall sensor already has a pull-up built up into it. And he says if you're running 2 pull-ups, you're basically overheating the sensor and basically causing it to prematurely wear out and self-destruct. So basically all these years I've been having kind of a ticking time bomb. And I'm kind of figuring, you know, I've never really pushed the car a whole lot. Yeah, I have gone around and made 30-minute drives and 40-minute drives, but, you know, kind of been on the highway and always moving. But during 6th summer, you know, we did a lot of highway, but then we did a lot of town driving, and, you know, it was hot, and, you know, you gotta, now I'm running a turbo on the thing, and, you know, you got a lot of heat in here, and that combined with, you know, running the extra pull-up, you know, the Hall effect sensor didn't like it. So that's kind of one of the issues. The other issue I did notice when I, you know, was looking for this, because I couldn't remember if I still had to pull up in there. Couldn't remember where I put it, because you can put this thing just about anywhere. You can put it in line with the Hall sensor. You can put it in the ECU, and I'm figuring that's what I did, because that's where I found it. But when I was sitting there kind of examining this, you know, it was covered in heat shrink, and it just looked like a regular wire. But, you know, I could feel something in there, and in the process of kind of feeling it, it came unconnected from one of the solder joints. So it's possible that this sucker was loose in there and wasn't making a good contact, and, you know, it could have been part of my hiccup. So like I said, I've noticed with the car last year had a problem when I was trying to drag race with a heavy start and takeoff would cause the car to kind of die and go. I did find some bad connections in there, but those were more sensor connections. And I thought at the time that I was running my Hall effect sensor off the 5 volt, because you can run it off a 5 volt or you can run it off the 12 volt. But I was actually running it off the key, so it was actually getting 12 volts. It wasn't even hooked to my fuel pressure or oil pressure sensor. So yeah, this could have been the culprit, or just the fact that the sensor was prematurely wearing out could have been a factor in my hiccups. So back on the sensors here. I don't think I need this anymore. Now I've already told you about running a Dodge Hall effect sensor or the DIY Hall effect sensor. You know, I never knew, you know, that this sensor had a pull-up and electronics. I figured it had some type of electronics in it, but I didn't realize it had a pull-up in it. So now, you know, they make Hall effect sensors with or without. Sometimes you need a pull-up, sometimes you don't. And there's several different resisting ratings depending on what you kind of need for a pull-up. And then on top of that, you have your VR sensor. And that's what we got here. This is pulled off of, this is actually pulled off a Mustang. So being that it's off a Mustang, it should match the trigger wheel I got, I'm hoping. So I was actually in the process of switching back over to the VR sensor, and I grabbed a few from the local salvage yard here just to play with and to understand. And one of the things to understand is they are magnetic. And the way the VR sensor works, it's kind of, I guess the best way to explain it is like a magneto. There's actually a little thing back in here that's magnetic that kind of goes back and forth, and the faster it goes back and forth, the more volts it'll produce. This is the deal with the VR sensor, is it is noisy. It does create a lot of interference, but it is more durable, and I guess it withstands heat a lot better. Where the Hall effect sensor is kind of quite the opposite. It actually does have 3 wires, but it has a power wire ran to it, where the VR doesn't. And the Hall effect sensor does, like I said, require voltage, and it deals with you know, noise or interference a lot better than the VR sensor. But on the downside, they don't deal with heat as much. Now I was chatting with, you know, in the process of figuring this all out with DIY, and those guys over there did tell me that they are working on testing a newer Hall sensor, and he says it should be a direct fit to what I have here, and it does deal with heat a lot better. You know, the heat range I think is like 245 degrees on this particular one that I'm running right now, but I think that other one is rated, you know, maybe like 50 degrees more in heat. So heat. You can see, you know, I'm not really running any engine tin in here, you know, or a turbo blanket, and I don't wrap my exhaust. I guess I'm gonna have to, you know, maybe start concentrate on trying to figure out how to keep the heat out of here and get it out this way. You know, I do run the trunk lid propped a little bit to try to help evacuate some of the heat. I don't know, maybe I'll stand it up a little bit more and try to get more heat flow coming through this way. I haven't quite figured out if I'm gonna do that or not. I don't really like that look, but you know, if it's down to survivability or looks, probably should take the survivability. You can see I'm still got the Hall sensor on here, and I didn't change over the VR sensor yet. In the process of elimination, I'll try to explain this because I'm still trying to figure out how to understand it. With the build in the ECU, like I said, the assembly manual said build it like this for VR and build it like this for Hall sensor. If you go into the build manual, it actually tells you on there, if you're going to use a Hall effect sensor, build it like this, which kind of matches the assembly manual. But then you come over here to the VR sensor, it says if you're going to run a VR sensor, build it like this. But then if you read past that on the build manual, it says, you know, VR sensor, another sensor, or a Hall effect sensor with a pull-up. So from day one, I had the ECU built like this when it should have been built like this for this sensor. Well, the nice thing about building it for the VR sensor, I didn't have to run that jump wire that I had the pull-up in. That was the issues with the Halls, that was the issues with the crank sensor and the ECU. But then I wound up having, after I changed out the crank sensor, you know, I thought this crank sensor was going because the car just didn't go well. It was even showed on the drag strip that it just fell on its face, and I think I ran a 15-second quarter mile. And now my anxiety and my frustration is just getting to me because I don't know what's going on. I'm thinking I'm going to lose another crank sensor, and I only brought us one spare. I was hoping I wasn't going to need that because I ran the original one forever until like 3 weeks before 6 summer, I had to replace it. So the one I had on the car was a replacement, and then now I'm running the third replacement. So hopefully, you know, that's the only replacement I need, or until DIY sends the you know, their new one that they're in testing with for me to try out. But I'll bring you guys over here. Yeah, if you see right here, this is my fuel injector clip. And when I changed out my fuel injectors, these sit a lot lower. And I didn't quite get that on there. I should probably pull up on, yeah, see, that one's on there. They got this metal clip on here. And you can see mine's sitting at an angle now because, you know, it hits the manifold. What I had done, dummy me, like I said, victim of my own demise, I apparently didn't get this one on all the way. Because 3 weeks after 6 summer, I'm still trying to figure out what's going on. I finally got the ECU straightened out. And someone forgot to put the vacuum reference line on, so the car ran like poop even more. And I was trying to pull plugs and get an idea of what was going on. I look over, and this clip, there, it was just kind of sitting like that. I changed out spark plug number 3 over there, went over to do number 4, and I completely looked at that and didn't even register. I'm like, until I got spark plug number 4 out, and I'm like, I don't remember pulling this injector plugs. Well, then I put it back on, of course, made the click. You know, I had the car up on jack stands because I'm looking at the fuel system. I had the front end torque part. I was looking at the fuel pump, and I had all the plugs out. I'm like, before I do anything else, because I had a couple ideas that I thought might have been going on with the fuel system, you know, because that's all new too. I decided I wasn't going to do any of that, you know, until I took the car for another drive. I'd get going down the road, and you know, a thing would start making boost, and then it would fall on its face, not make any more boost. I'm like, what in the tarnation is going on? I thought it was in the fuel. So I'm taking data logs and, you know, looking at the fuel system, and then I see that plug undone. So I'm like, I'm gonna put everything back together before I tear into anything. Clip that plug back on there, put the spark plugs back in, and go for a drive. Well, sure enough, thing ran great. Big smile on my face again. I'm stupid. No doubt about it. If it's gonna go wrong, it's gonna go wrong with me. That's basically what I have figured out with Sick Summer. I still haven't really got back on the road and tested the car yet. Kind of waiting for, you know, another hot, clear day, time to get the car out and, you know, try to find a good replicated route, you know, where I'm doing highway and back roads and some city driving. But before I do that, I do have to get the computer back out, and I want to put the battery in. When I convert it over to the MS3, the MS3 has an onboard SD card, so you can data log. But every time you fire the ECU up, it starts back at 0. The clock light does. You know, it says, yep, we're born right now, this is where we start. And then as soon as you turn the car off, fire it back up, it goes back to 0. So it's really hard to find, you know, your data logs. Say you wanted to see what you did, you know, yesterday, because you don't know what time or the date. I didn't know at the time that, you know, you needed a clock battery, and they have a kit at DIY just for that. So I'm going to install that. It requires soldering, fine soldering. So wish me luck, because, you know, I'm not an electrician and I can solder, but not really fine. So I'm hoping I get that battery in there, and then and once I get that done, I'll fire up the laptop and I'll show you guys kind of what I'm talking about with the data logs and the clock and all that fun stuff. So yeah, let's get right back to it. As I let the solder iron warm up, I think I'm going to show you guys kind of what I got going on here. This is basically what I purchased here. It's this little chip, and it takes a, if you've been in any electronic devices and seen the batteries, you kind of recognize this. I mean, I'm sure some of you guys replace batteries in your remote for your cars. And then the kit also comes with some pins here. And I was kind of worried, thought it was going to be kind of hard to solder, because I thought this was like a pin bracket. I didn't realize that these were individual pins. So I thought they were really close, but they're not. As you can kind of see on here, you see these 5 holes here. You match these 5 holes up with the, I should explain that this chip is the, they call this a real-time module, and it's going to solder onto this here. This is the MX3 expander board. Yeah, if you guys haven't seen any of my other Mega Squirt builds or add-ons, I'll kind of give you a brief description, or give you a brief tour of the Mega Squirt ECU. But this is the Mega Squirt ECU, and basically all your MS1s, MS2, and MS3 all have this bottom board. I've never really built an MS1 or seen the inside of an MS1, so I really can't tell you what's on top of it. But I'll tell you, this white board on top of here, this here is the daughter board. This is what separates the MS2 from the MS3. The MS2 has a smaller daughter board. This one just happens to be bigger with a few more things, like a port, or it kind of looks like a phone jack port or a USB port, and a memory card. And then these fancy wires on here are what attach the expander board. Basically, if you want everything out of the MS3 board, you kind of need the expansion board, because you can see it's got another one of these 32 serial port plug-in deals. So it gives you a whole bunch more options, and it kind of actually does make it a little easier to wire. And since the solder iron is warmed up now, I'm going to get to soldering here, and then I'll kind of show you what it looks like, and then we got to test to see if it works. All right, kind of half done. I thought I'd show you guys an update here, and kind of how this board goes on the other board. Closer look here. Here's the 5 pins I installed, and if you can see, there's some numbers like H2, H3, H4, then there's H5 and H6. One's labeled VCC and the other's labeled ground, so the VCC is your 5 volt. If you grab a hold of your board here, you can kind of see that it has basically the same numbers on them, or at least the H2 and the ground. But yeah, you just kind of match them up. The 5 volt, like I said, is the VCC, and then you can see there's a H2. Goes with the H2. Now the instructions were kind of vague. It's the build sheet online does have instructions, but you know, when you go order this off the DIY, there is a link in the description of the part that sends you to this build manual. But basically, when it said you know, remove your board, blah 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 blah, position the RTCC module as shown with the ground in the 5 volt, align the VC to the empty pad. H2 is above H2. Well, what they don't tell you is that you need the other 2 pins. You use 5 out of the 8 pins that come with the kit. I'm gonna finish soldering this up, and then we'll give it a test. All right, that didn't take long at all. I'll give you a look at the board here. My solder work really wasn't that hard. More fun than hard. Now to put it all back together and see if it works. Now, what I didn't point out is you will need a battery. This does not come in the kit. And in the instructions, they tell you that once you put this battery in, this thing is live. So be careful you don't short anything out. Don't let the magic smoke out. So I'm going to install this and then get the gem stem hooked up and fire up a laptop and see if we can figure out how to set the clock. Okay, we are live. Now I got to remember where the setting is at. View, browse, import SD card. Maybe that's where it's at. Could be show data log file folder. There we are. I guess that's what we're looking for. Set MS3 time to now. Okay, right now it shows January 1st, 2000, must have been when the board was born. Then what happens is every time you fire up the ECU, you know, turn the key on, turn the key off, that clock always resets to that time. So what we're hoping is we're gonna set the time, and I think if I hit the set MS3 time now, it's gonna set it to where my computer is, because my computer is hooked up to the internet, and we're gonna get an internet time, which is actually saying it's about 5 p.m. So let's see what happens. Bam. July 14th, 2024, 4:56 p.m. So let's X out of this. Let's power off. So now we're offline. We'll give it 10 seconds. This should be good. Power back on. All right, Tuner Studio is back live. Let's go back to data login. We'll go down to browse SD card, and it says January 2001. I guess I gotta follow the instructions, you know, that other guy's opinion. All right, well, apparently we don't set it into data logging. So let's X out of there. Let's go to CAN bus, real-time clock. Oh, there it is. Real-time clock. Bam. Real-time clock should be on board. There. And again, down here it says 2001. Let's set this to now. Bam. Oh, we need the power cycle. Let's power cycle. Every time this gray bar comes up, they want you to power cycle. Alright, for fun, we'll go to data logging. Let's see what it says in there. It says December now. I like that. There's no burn in here. We'll close. Real-time clock. How come I keep going over top of it? Alright, now it says January 14th. It's matching the local PC time. That is good. This is the important one. Okay, that stayed the same. Let's see what happens if we power cycle again. Cross our fingers. Ha! We got it. At least this time it stayed. Cool. All right, well, it's time to put this whole mess back together, clean everything up, get this back in the car, and go for a drive. So yep, I'll see you guys upstairs. Well, thanks for joining me today. We'll end it out here. And since we got everything going, Simon seems to be behaving. I do have a race coming up here. It's going to be a fun one. Something I've signed up for the last 2 or 3 years, but I've never competed in. It either got rained out or I wound up getting busy or something and either forgot about it or didn't do it. But it's down in Three Rivers, Michigan, and it's called the Airfield Drags. It's actually going to take place at an airport on a runway. Yeah, on a runway, which, you know, for airplanes coming and going. But so it should be fun. It's going to be different because you know, it's going to be all makes and models. They do require the vehicles to be, I think, older than 78 or 79, if I believe. I'd have to look again. And you're not allowed to do anything like delay boxes or line locks or launch control. So it's going to kind of limit, you know, me especially, because that's how I'm used to racing. You know, I have a launch control with a line lock. So it's going to be a little different. I'm going to have to figure out how not to roll and not to over rev the engine when I take off. So yeah, that is kind of a nice handicap, and it's designed to be, you know, a fun day with cool cars. Yeah, until then, keep cruising, keep shifting those gears, and always enjoy the ride. Let's go. 4 hours just